You are listening to the Bright Life Podcast, all about ways to stay inspired, chase your dreams, and find more gratitude in the highs and lows of the journey. I'm your host, Jessica Johnson. I'm a business owner, a part-time digital nomad, a self-growth junkie, a believer in other big-hearted women, and am all about sharing tips, tricks, lessons learned, and encouragement so we can all live our biggest, brightest lives. You ready? Let's do this. Hi, gorgeous. Welcome to today's episode. So today's episode is all about a concept that will help you move things from a nice to do or maybe I'll get to it one day to moving it to something that you feel empowered to fully do today. So if you've ever had those things that you're like, I try over and over again, but it never really clicks, or I find myself saying I'll do this thing, but I just don't do it. This episode, I think, is really going to light a fire around that. It's inspired by Jesse Itzler, who is the husband of Sarah Blakely of Spanx, the billion-dollar shapewear company. He, in his own right, is an author, an entrepreneur. He has sold 5 different companies. He's a motivational speaker. And I was listening to him on another podcast called My First Millions, which is another great podcast if you love a mix of business and personal development. And he, in an offhand way, shared this one concept that was such a part of the broader conversation, but I immediately wrote it down and thought I have to share this with you because this is so good. This is definitely something that I'm going to take with me the rest of my life, and I hope that you can do the same. And it's this concept of can or will. So at some point in his life earlier on, he had someone who questioned him. He was going off about the things that he could do or what could happen in a business. And someone said to him, Jesse, can or will? Meaning we all have those things that we say we can do, right? Like we can get the client, we can build a business, we can leave our jobs, we can move, we can save more money, we can get in shape, right? But there's a different level when you actually make that internal decision of can versus will. If you say will, there's so much more intensity around it. It feels more like a commitment, doesn't it? So try it for yourself. Say something like, I can leave my job versus I will leave my job. Immediately there's this level of necessity where you're starting to, when you say will, it's like you're making a plan for it, right? You've suddenly made the decision in your head for whether or not you're going to do something. Can makes it feel like it's still on the table. And so when I heard that, I thought, wow, that's a really great thing to keep in mind for any area of our life that we are either one, kind of toying with and haven't really opted in one way or the other yet, but we're still playing that can game, or 2, any area of our life where it feels like we are always circling the same goal, and we're like in it for a few weeks or we dabble a little bit, but we haven't actually achieved what we want yet. And we've never made it feel like something we can stick to. It could be the difference between can or will in your own mind and in your own habits and life. So I have a few examples, and then I'm sure you can already maybe even think of an area of your life that it could apply to as well. So one of the first examples I thought of, since we talk a lot about entrepreneurship on this podcast, is starting your own side hustle or business. There's so much out there these days around starting a business and building something you're passionate about and finding another income stream or way to do something you love. But if you've been in this dance of, I can't do that, like you've been thinking about it for a few months or a few years even, like I could start my own business, I could start a side hustle, I have some ideas, I can. Have you given yourself the chance to decide if it's really just a can or if it's a will? I will start my business. I will start my side hustle. I will begin that dream that I've had in my heart for months or years. Because once you say will, at least in my head, immediately all of these ideas for ways I can start to take action appear. It's kind of like magic, right? Because if you just stay in this place of can, you never really force yourself to be at the crossroads of what would I do to make it work. Once you say I will start my business, all of a sudden your brain starts looking for the ways to make that a reality. It starts thinking, okay, well, what would I do? I guess I would need to decide what my business is about. I guess I would need to decide the name of it. I'd probably need to go online and look up and see, how do you start a business? Maybe I need to find a mentor, maybe a program or something to teach me. But will gives you this starting point where you can start to see the steps that maybe you never actually saw when you kept things at the level of, I could do that. I can do that one day. It also invites you to create a timeline, doesn't it, with will? If you are going to do something, if you will start a business, well, what's your date? When are you going to do this thing? And so I think it invites you to really define those variables that maybe were kept really vague, and maybe that's been part of the challenge of even starting to begin with. I was thinking about this with the women who were in my copywriting program and sharing a little bit with them last night about this on one of our coaching calls, and thinking of how this applies even to like getting your first client. So whether you are a content writer, whether you have a jewelry business, whether you do interior design, it can all relate, even if you have a dream and you haven't started yet, to getting your first client. There's a difference in feeling between saying, I can do that, and I will get my first client this month. I will get a client this month. Because I think can lets you off the hook a little, doesn't it? It kind of lets you say like, I could do that, but other things can come up. It's not as big of a priority. If there's time, if it feels good, if you shift that can to will, where no matter what, you will get a client this month, all of a sudden, the same thing as in the last example happens, where your brain shifts to, how can I do this? What are all the ways that I can do this? And how can I start going through them today? And if maybe you wouldn't have followed up before because it's scary or intimidating, now there's a different level of commitment, isn't there? Where now there's this feeling of, I am going to get this client one way or the other. How do I make this work? What needs to be said? What kind of follow-ups can I do? What would help set me apart from everyone else? Could I get my portfolio that much better? Could I make sure that I'm the most professional person they've ever talked to? Could I check in with them 3 or 4 times because maybe that 4th time is the yes? Can I try some methods that I've never tried before? Can I go deeper? If I would have sent a few messages and just hoped for the best, instead, could I send 20 different messages? Could I spend 30 minutes of my day where there's no chance that at the end of the month I don't have that new client? That is the difference in a lot of our graduates that go through with that mentality of like, I will get my first client. I will get a client this month. And I always tell them, if you think about it that way, it actually makes your life so much better in the long run, because instead of staying in this place of I can or I could or who knows when you add a will to that, I will get a client this month, that means that you could be a few months away from being booked full. If you get one client this month with 10 hours a week of work, so this is for writing, but it could apply to graphic design or any other done-for-you businesses. Maybe it's home organization, interior design, like things like that. If you get a client with 10 hours of work this month, and you do the same thing the next month, and the same thing the next month, and the same thing one more month, so for 4 months, you multiply that by 10, you now have replaced a 40-hour-a-week job. And you may not even need to work that many hours depending on your income goals or whether you want this to be a side hustle versus a business. So I don't want to get too granular there, but I just want to show you like that the intensity is actually a gift, because it's going to get you through the fire just a little bit faster. And let me tell you, like getting through those first few months of starting a business or a side hustle or getting your first clients and just having that part out of the way is so much better to do in a finite window than to feel like you're a little more comfortable, but you're in that gauntlet for years. So if you can just run at something and sprint at it for a few months, and then the rest of your business have the clients, be booked full, whatever it may be for you, what a better feeling, right? So can versus will. Same thing, a third example with like investing in a certain mentor or program. So if you've been on the fence thinking about something for years now, there's a difference between I can do that, I can invest, I can get started on that course or that program versus like I will. And here's the date I will do it by. It gives you the chance to make that decision in your head, whether you are in or out. And here's the other piece of it is like, you may find you can't say will. And so for then, give yourself the gift of just getting clear that this is not a priority for you. Maybe it will be one day, but if you can't say, I will do this thing, then it just signals to me that there's something in you that isn't quite ready to make that decision yet. And so just be honest, right? Like let yourself off the hook if that's the case. Go figure out what your wills are, which you actually feel so clear on that you can say, I commit to this, I will do this thing. And then don't confuse the other things with it. Like don't give the things that aren't actually the most important things to you. Don't like muddy the water with them, right? Like really put your heart and your focus into the things that you absolutely want, that you will make happen. And then let the rest go. And maybe you revisit them in another season, but almost like give yourself just the chance to be really, really honest with yourself there. I think it could make such a difference. Now, if you're thinking, okay, like business sounds good, but I'm not a will for that yet, then maybe it's a health goal for you. Is something a can or is it a will? I will achieve this health goal. I will achieve this strength goal. Maybe it's something like planning for this trip that you've been dreaming of going on. And it's like, I can do that, or will you? Because if you will, then you'll just make different decisions. You'll find ways to save that you haven't seen before. I think the will can be such a blessing because it invites in awareness that you haven't had before on ways to get creative, on ways to make things work. And there could be a 30-second difference from you changing something from a can to a will. But in that 30 seconds of saying this, I will do this, all of a sudden your brain is going to be so much more creative and it's going to open up awareness that you didn't have 30 seconds ago for ways that you can get inventive and decisive and resourceful and make something true for you. So that's my invitation this week, and I hope it fires you up as much as it did for me when I heard that other podcast episode. But I want to just invite you to decide if there's a decision that you have been mulling over, or you feel like you've been circling, you feel like it's never quite come to fruition. Is it a can for you, or is it something that you will make happen? And then allow your life to reflect that different level of commitment and belief and decision that you have made. All right, I'd love to hear if this is helpful to you, and otherwise I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll be back here next Thursday. Thank you so much for listening in. If you love this episode, I have 2 things you are going to love. One is a free copywriter training full of 5 steps to build a profitable copywriting business as your own boss, no matter how much experience you're starting with. Copywriting is what took me from a 9-to-5 to freedom as my own boss, to travel, choose my schedule, replace my corporate income, and have time to work on creative projects like this podcast. And I'd love to give other women the same opportunity. Another, of course, is my book, Your Bright Life. You can find it on Amazon or Audible, where I narrate the audiobook, so it's kind of like a podcast in book form. All of these things are in the podcast show notes. Thank you again for listening. I appreciate you and your review so much, and I'll see you back here next Thursday.